What's up, Geeksters? It's me, Omar from Geekster Labs, and today I have my final video in my series of Lumix S1 videos for my channel. If you guys want to check out any other videos in this playlist, make sure you click on the card in the top right corner or click on the playlist at the end of this video. So this is going to be the full detailed review of the Panasonic Lumix S1. So this camera currently retails for $3,400 with the 24-105 f4 lens kit on bnhphoto.com, and I'd like to thank them for sending me this loaner to test and review for you guys. There will be a link in the description if you're interested in purchasing this camera from their site. Okay, so let's chat about the physical aspects of this camera. Now, I'm not going to dig too deep into the buttons and ports of this camera because I actually have a separate video which gives a detailed breakdown of every button and port on this camera. And if you want to check out that video, click on the card in the top right corner. But there are a few things I do want to mention in regards to button arrangement though. First off, I really like the button layout on the back of this camera. Everything seems to be in just the right position, right, in just the right spot. And at first, I wasn't a fan of the hard plastic flat joystick because I was so used to the gummy, longer one that the GH5 has. But after using it for a bit, it's actually much more accurate than using the softer GH5 joystick. But I wasn't a big fan of the shutter button while shooting stills. It doesn't quite have that pop or that click sensation when you press it all the way down. It kind of just squeezes down and doesn't really give you any kind of like tactile feedback to let you know that you've pressed it in all the way. So those are just a few thoughts on the buttons, but this camera actually allows for extensive customization, and not just of the buttons but of the way the buttons behave as well, which is pretty cool. The one port that I will mention in this review is the USB Type-C port. And not only is this port useful for like super quick exporting of footage and also charging the battery in the camera, but it also supports continuous power while it charges the battery in the camera with the included AC adapter. And it'll even work off of a backup battery in a pinch as well. And so if you like shooting time lapses, this probably would really come in handy for you. Using the charger was kind of a pain though, because it requires 2 bricks and 2 cables, right? You have the cable that goes into the wall into the first brick, and then the USB Type-C cable that goes from that into the actual charger itself. I wish the main charger had like retractable prongs so I wouldn't need the cables to plug it into the wall. But I suppose if you're traveling and you have a laptop with you that supports USB Type-C, that you could just use the USB Type-C cable, plug it into the laptop, and that's what you could use to charge up your camera. And just to point out, the included battery is a 3050 milliamp battery, and it performed quite well for long shoots, even video shoots. I was pretty surprised by that. So now let's talk about the body of the S1. So this camera is a big boy. It has a chunky, weather-sealed body and some good weight to it, weighing in at almost 4 pounds with the included lens. It's just a little bit bigger than the GH5, which is nice, but it feels solid and durable. Like you could drop it and it would be fine from low heights. Not that I would ever test that. Relax, B&H, I did not drop this camera. I loved the huge chunky L-mount lens that came with this kit, which is the 24-105mm. It's like a wide angle to short telephoto lens. It features a constant f4 aperture and optical image stabilizer, which aids in like the dual image stabilization of the S1. The focus and the zoom rings were real smooth, and those are easy to use. The only bummer about this new series of lens mount is that there's not a lot of glass currently available. I think only Leica, Sigma, and Panasonic will be making lenses for this mount as well, so you can imagine they're probably going to cost a pretty penny. Supposedly there will be more than 10 lenses coming in 2020. I did, however, get my hands on a Sigma EF to L lens adapter, which allowed me to use some of my Canon glass, including my 70-200 IS2 telephoto lens, which was a pairing made in heaven. I did have some issues using this adapter with my Sigma 18-35 art lens. I'm not sure why I was bugging out. Sigma says that this adapter is compatible with the select number of Sigma's own EF mount lenses, and it may or may not be suitable for use with the other manufacturers' EF mount lenses, but my 18-35 art lens is actually on this list of compatible lenses. So I'm not sure what the deal is, but it didn't want to work with it and it kept having issues with it. Okay, moving on. So the live viewfinder is amazingly sharp, and it's actually the highest resolution currently on the market right now. It was great, especially for shooting stills, since it allows you to see like what you're actually shooting live with barely any latency. And I love how the eye sensor is on the top of the viewfinder instead of below it like on my GH5, because this causes me to constantly turn off the back screen by accident when it gets too close to me. And speaking of the touchscreen, this 3.2-inch LCD display was sharp, responsive, and pretty bright, which made outside shooting a breeze without always needing like an external display. However, this brings us to my biggest gripe about this camera, which is the lack of a swivel out display. It looks like Panasonic has decided to go the Sony route and to remove the swivel out screen, which is currently available like on all their other cameras except the S1R. So obviously the only time I really want to use a swivel out screen is when I'm filming myself and there's no one else to help me, like right now. The screen does tilt to the right side, which is nice, but the loss of a swivel out screen is a real bummer for me. Not only does having a swivel out screen eliminate me needing to use an external monitor to see myself when filming solo, but it also helps to protect the LCD display when you're storing the camera away, right? Because you could flip out the screen and close it up and you won't accidentally damage it. You can use the free Lumix Sync app to aid in like framing up shots, but I'd still prefer to have a swivel out screen. Okay, so let's talk about media. So the S1 does come equipped with dual card slots. However, only one of them is an SD slot. The other slot is an XQD card slot. And if you're not familiar with XQD cards, they're kind of like the successor to like compact flash cards. Remember those? They're specifically designed to handle like super fast read and write speeds and have higher capacities. But of course, like any new media, they're pretty expensive. A 120 gigabyte card with crazy fast 400 megabits per second write speeds is gonna run you almost $200. So overall, the S1 looks great and feels comfortable on the hand while using it. So now let's get down to the nitty gritty and discuss a few specs of the S1. So with the S1, we have a full frame Lumix camera that will shoot 4K with no crop, as long as you're filming 4K in 24, 25, and 30 frames per second, okay? If you want to shoot them in 60 frames per second, there will be a slight crop. It's like a 1.5 times crop, which I'm totally good with. Oh, and speaking of crop, the S1 can shoot up to 180 frames per second for beautiful, awesome slow-mo footage, but it does have a slight crop on it for 180. It's not a huge deal, but it is a slight bummer since the GH5 doesn't crop when shooting 180 frames per second. Also, the GH5 gives you a tons of options for speeds. It goes from 2 to 180 frames per second, but the S1 only offers 180, 150, and 60 frames per second at 30p. So if I'm being honest though, I only really use 180 when shooting slow motion, except when filming like around some fluorescent lights because that causes like flickering. But the S1 has really great flicker reduction, so I'm not really worried about that. The S1 offers a Panasonic's exceptional 5-axis in-body stabilization, where like the sensor actually moves around to keep everything nice and smooth, like in the GH5. And if you're using the included L-mount lens, which also features optical image stabilization, then you'll be rolling with what Panasonic calls its dual IS setup, right? And so this is great for shooting stills because it reduces shake by like 6 stops with this lens. And video footage is very smooth even when walking with the camera. I've heard a few people complaining about Panasonic's DFD, or their depth from defocus technology, which it uses to like calculate the distance to subjects and to adjust the focus rather quickly. And this contrast-based like autofocus, in my opinion, works rather well. It's probably not as quick and solid as Sony's autofocus, because it will strobe at times and it will do some searching depending on the conditions though, but I thought it was fine. And to be honest, when I shoot video, I hardly ever use autofocus. I stick with manual. Probably the only time I shoot video with autofocus turned on is when I'm like using a gimbal, and I don't plan on strapping this big boy onto a gimbal. So the biggest thing that I love about the S1 was of course the full frame sensor. Images and footage captured with the S1 looked so clean and crisp and professional, with like a wide dynamic range and great color reproduction. And these aren't really things that can be quantified, right, or have stats behind them. It's just something you have to see for yourself. And I do have a separate sample footage video with clips from a wedding shoot that I filmed and other tests that I ran while using this camera, so you can see for yourself what I'm talking about. So guys, I have to say that I'm actually considering switching from my GH5 to the S1. It feels like a natural progression between the two cameras, and with the beautiful rich images that the full frame sensor is able to capture, it almost makes me forget that it doesn't have a flip out screen. So those are my thoughts on the Lumix S1. So let me know if you have any questions. And once again, I want to thank B&H Photos so much for loaning me this camera and letting me review this for you guys. I'll have a link down below in the description to make this camera easy to find on their website. So don't forget to click on the playlist here to see my other videos in this S1 series. And you can click on my face to subscribe to my channel. And don't forget to ring that bell to be notified of all my other reviews as they come out. And I will see you guys in the next video review.